Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Daryl. And thank you, Robert. Robert, I too fall into that group of people who sometimes behaves like hot garbage. And sometimes it's just nice to be reminded in such plain terms. Yeah, I do that as well, and it's nice to have it called out sometimes. So thank you for that. This is Colonel Sanders. Well, this is a cartoon image of Colonel Sanders on a chicken bucket incorporated into the logo of KFC. Uh, this is the real Colonel Sanders. Harlan is his real first name, although he became known as the Colonel later in life. Colonel Sanders is, of course, the creator and the face of what is now the global fast food chain Kentucky Fried Chicken, or KFC for short. KFC is the world's second largest restaurant chain, second only to McDonald's, of course. All that from 11 herbs and spices and a pressure fryer. Well, and Colonel Sanders' dogged pursuit of his dream. Sanders' father passed away when he was 5 years old, which sent his mother to work in a local canning facility to provide for their family. And at 7 years old, she began to teach little Harlan how to cook in order to help around the house. So she taught him all of their family's best recipes, and Harlan learned in the kitchen beginning at a very young age. Throughout his early life, Sanders worked several different jobs, none of them very successfully, until he took over a Shell station in his hometown of North Corbin, Kentucky. And on the side of this Shell station was a little living quarters that he moved into. So he began running this gas station, but he never lost his passion for cooking, especially his mother's recipes. And so he began serving food out of his little living quarters to the gas station patrons. They would literally walk into his house and sit down at his little kitchen table, and he would serve them meals that he had prepared. His favorite, of course, was his fried chicken. It was there that he began to hone this recipe and change it over time and find the way that he liked to cook it. The Sanders Court and Cafe, as it was called, became pretty successful around this little area in Kentucky. It became well known, and in fact, it was even praised in the paper by a famed food critic whose name you might recognize, named Duncan Hines, who wrote that he really enjoyed the Sanders Court and Cafe fried chicken. All seemed to be going well at the Sanders Court and Cafe until a new highway went through Kentucky and pulled people away from North Corbin, so much so that Sanders had to close his gas station and his restaurant. Literally heartbroken and broke, Sanders took matters into his own hands. He believed that his chicken recipe was something that people would eat and love and enjoy and buy. So, in his 50s, Sanders loaded up his car and everything that he had, and he began driving across the country, sleeping in that car, trying to sell this recipe to anyone who would listen to him. He started in Kentucky and went all the way to Salt Lake City before he found his first partner. Legend has it he was rejected over 1,000 times before finding someone to partner with him in this venture, and his first franchise opened in Salt Lake City, Utah. As of 2020, KFC had 24,104 locations in 150 different countries. In 1987, it became the first U.S.-owned restaurant chain to operate in China. And to this day, China makes up a large portion of KFC's control. And KFC operates with a yearly revenue of nearly $28 billion. This is Andy Bernard. He's a character on my favorite TV show, The Office. In season 7 of The Office, the boss, Michael Scott, is leaving the company, and the office is in search of a new boss. They're interviewing all kinds of people, including those who work there in the office, and Andy decides that he wants this job. He wants to be the new manager. His approach to getting this job is quite different from Colonel Sanders, though. In fact, if you can see, he has a little button on his chest that says Andy for manager, and there's a question mark after it. Andy famously says in season 7 here, my clicker worked, there we go. In my family, you don't really go out and get things. If you want something, you write it on a list, and then the housekeeper goes out and gets it on Wednesdays and Fridays. So, I don't know. I guess you could say this job is on my list, and we'll see what the housekeeper comes back with. Last week we began a new sermon series that we're calling Not a Thing. And by that, what we mean is that Christianity is not a thing. We've begun in the last few decades to talk about Christianity in terms of an entity. I think Christianity is not an entity. Christianity is not a thing. When we read the New Testament, we find that following Jesus or becoming a disciple of Jesus isn't becoming a member of an organization or a member of a thing. In fact, before people who follow Jesus were called Christians, they were called the way, because following Jesus is a way of life. It's a way to live in the world. If I were to give this series a subtitle, it would be The Church is Not a Building and Christianity is Not a Thing. The church is people, and Christianity is those people living the teachings of Jesus day in and day out, speaking a certain way, doing certain things, allowing these teachings of Jesus to work their way into our hearts and change who we are as people. So each week we're going to look at a verb that describes what it's like to live as a follower of Jesus. Last week we started with one of the big ones from the Great Commission. Go. Or even as we talked about, as you go, as you're going, go make disciples. As Jesus is ascending into heaven, he's asking his people to get down off of the mountain, leave the mountaintop, and go out into your life and make disciples. And this week, we are going to seek God. We're going to pursue the kingdom of heaven. We're going to seek after him. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus is in the middle of a string of parables. He's just throwing out teachings right and left. Parable here, parable there. We've got the famous parable of the sower. We've got the parable of the mustard seed. We've got the parable of the weeds. Again and again, Jesus is using these word pictures to try to communicate to his followers and teach them in ways that they'll know and understand and remember going forward. And in verse 44 of Matthew chapter 13, he'll tell them another parable. This parable I love because it's an entire epic story and it's wrapped up in 2 sentences. It's comprised of one verse in our Bible, and there is so much to glean from this little parable. Matthew 13, beginning in verse 44. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy, he went and sold all he had, and he bought that field. We can probably assume that our finder here is a day laborer, so he's probably not that wealthy to begin with. We can assume he's a day laborer because he's out in the field and he's digging in the middle of the day. And there he comes across a treasure. This wouldn't be uncommon in antiquity. We're dealing with kind of widespread poverty. And of course, there are no safety deposit boxes. And so finding a place to keep your valuables safe is a difficult task. And so people started going and burying them. They'd go find a spot, dig a hole, put it in the ground, and cover it up so nobody else could find it. As you well know, there are some problems with that tactic. A lot of times, treasures got lost. Maybe somebody forgot where they buried it. Or maybe they went back to the spot they thought they buried it and it wasn't there. Or maybe they left and forgot to take it with them. Or maybe they passed away and never sent instructions for their family on how to find it. So finding buried treasure was a thing that happened quite a bit. And also, again, we're talking about a time and place in the world where people did this. There was widespread poverty, and so buried treasure stories were incredible. Buried treasure stories happen all the time. They told them everywhere they went, kind of like our rags to riches stories here in the U.S., much like the one we just talked about with Colonel Sanders. So our main character discovers this incredible prize buried in a field. Filled with joy, he buries it back down, and he does what? He sells everything he has, and he buys the field. Now, we can pick stories like this to death. Like we can start looking at all the details here and thinking, okay, so probably the landowner has rights to anything that's found in the field, so if he really wants this, he has to go buy the field in order to keep the prize, and that's probably true. But let's not miss the low-hanging fruit here, okay? Let's just back up for a second. Again, this is a time and area in the world where buried treasured stories are very popular. They happen all over the place. Those buried treasure stories usually end with a description of the finder's newfound wealth. This is someone who was poor and broke and stumbled upon a buried treasure, and it changed their life, and now they're rich. This is the buried treasure story. And Jesus just told the anti-buried treasure story. This is a person who found a treasure, and it cost him everything he had. He took everything that he had, and he sold it in order to go take possession of this gift, of this treasure. Jesus says, in the kingdom of heaven, this treasure is something that is worth so much that we would give up everything else we have to go take hold of it, to go keep it, to seek it. As we're reading our Bibles, if we come across a word or a phrase or a teaching that appears multiple times in a row, it's usually a sign that this is something important that we should take note of. And as Jesus wraps up this short parable, he's going to tell another one immediately on the heels of it. Again, he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who is looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and he sold everything he had and bought it. Once again, the story doesn't end with the wealth that the pearl brings. The story ends with the cost that it took to get it. Jesus says this is a merchant. This is someone who deals in pearls. He's looking for pearls in order to continue to profit, in order to continue to capitalize on his wealth. He finds a pearl that is so beautiful and so important and so incredible that it's not one that's going to add to his portfolio. It's not one that he's going to turn around and resell and make profit off of. It's one that he's going to go sell everything he has so he can have it. He's going to go pursue, he's going to go seek this pearl. Jesus seems to be saying in these two parables that there is a quest involved in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus seems to be saying that in the kingdom of heaven, pursuing this requires something of us, that there is cost involved. Listen to Jesus' teaching in Matthew 7, in the Sermon on the Mount, and it's there that we'll find our word for today. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Jesus says, ask and seek and knock. All of these are proactive verbs. They require us to go out and do something. They require action of us. And each one of these verbs takes it a step further. If there's information that we want, if we require information, we're going to ask. We're going to ask questions. We'll go find out what we need to find out. We take the initiative to go find it. When we've lost something or we want to obtain something, we go looking for it. We go seeking after it. If I lost my keys, I don't just go throughout the rest of the day like nothing happened and hope I find them again. If you've lost your wallet recently, or you lost your phone, or you lost your keys, you stop everything that you're doing. Okay, where was I last? Where was I doing with it last? Where was I? We retrace our steps. We go on a search to find it. We don't just hope it shows back up. We go looking for those things. We pursue them. We seek them. And when we've got the information that we want, we're on the path to obtaining something that we really desire, and we come across a locked door. We knock. We knock. There's something standing in our way. We need to get through here. We're going to beat on the door until someone is motivated enough to answer for us, to open the door, to see what we're after. Ask and seek and knock. Following Jesus seems to require some sort of initiative on our part. It's going to ask something of us. It's going to cost us something. In fact, just a few chapters after our parables that we read in Matthew 13, Jesus will say this in Matthew 16. Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. And whoever loses their life for me will find it." Every good thing requires something of us. It requires some sort of sacrifice. And the things we really desire, we seek. The things we really want, we sacrifice for. The things that we want to obtain, we will do those. Jesus says, when we seek God, and we pursue the kingdom of heaven, we're successful. Ask and it will be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. James puts it this way: come near to God and he will come near to you. If we seek God, if we seek his kingdom, God will be found. The things in our lives that we desire, we will pursue. The things in our lives that we really want, we will sacrifice for. We do it all the time. Maybe right now there's a goal in front of you. There's a thing that you are sacrificing for. There's a thing that you want to obtain. There's a thing that you're willing to give up time and effort and money to get. What are those things? What are the things in our lives that we are willing to pursue, to sacrifice for? What are the things we're seeking? What are we striving for? I mean, when I first met Lauren, I pulled out all the stops, you know? I was researching fun date ideas. I was taking her to the most expensive restaurants my salary could afford, so Fuzzy's Taco Shop, the downtown one, okay? I cleaned parts of my house that as a bachelor I hadn't touched before, you know? Trying to make sure everything was on level, okay? I was pursuing her. I was sacrificing. I was doing what it took. When we look upon the state of our spiritual lives, are we Colonel Sanders or are we Andy Bernard? Are we willing to pursue the kingdom of heaven? Pursue that relationship with God? Or do we put it on a list, see what happens? For much of my life, I think I could argue it was the latter. A deeper spiritual walk with God was definitely something I wanted, but was I willing to seek it, to pursue it? Was I willing to sacrifice something for it? Or did I just say that it was something that I desired, put it on my prayer list, and see what God came back with? Our world needs Christians. I believe that 100%. Our world needs Christians more than it needs the entity that has become Christianity. The world needs Christian people more than it needs Christianity. The world needs Christian people more than it needs a Christian nation. The world needs Christian people more than it needs a thing. The world needs followers of Jesus who aren't just part of an organization, who aren't just members of a thing, but who are transformed by the Word of God and live it every single day. The world needs people that are actively living the teachings of Christ. Our world needs a church that's willing to go, to get off the top of the mountain, go out into the world and make disciples every day as we live and move and breathe in the world. And our world needs Christians who are willing to seek God and pursue the kingdom of heaven. There's one thing that I know to be true, and that is that God is seeking us. And if we can help you this morning, return the favor. Pursue him. Seek his kingdom first. Jesus says, all those other things come later. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened. And if we can help you in that journey this morning, would you come forward and meet me down here as we stand? And Josh leads us in one more song.